It was my second year at university when I first heard the stories about Dormitory B. A group of us were gathered in the common room one evening, sharing ghost stories over pizza. Most of the tales were typical: strange noises, flickering lights, the occasional cold spot. But then, Alex, a quiet upperclassman, spoke up. "You ever heard about the forgotten student?" he asked, leaning in with a knowing look. We all fell silent. Alex had that tone in his voice, the one that made everything sound real, even when it was absurd. "Supposedly," he continued, "there was a student who lived in room 307. No one knows her name. She was just forgotten. She never left her room, never showed up to class. No one checked on her. And then one day, she was just gone." The story sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Alice's voice dropped lower and his eyes scanned the room. "They say she haunts the dorm now because she was left to die alone. If you listen closely, you can hear her footsteps pacing in the halls late at night." I tried to laugh it off, but something about the way Alex said it unsettled me. That night, as I walked back to my dorm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. A few weeks later, the stories started to feel more real. My roommate Josh and I were returning to Dormitory B after a late study session. It was past midnight, and the place felt empty, eerily so. As we made our way to the stairs, I heard something. A faint tap, 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 like someone was walking just ahead of us. But when I looked, no one was there. Josh didn't seem to hear it, and I chalked it up to my imagination. But the next night I heard it again, this time coming from the hallway outside our door. I stepped into the corridor, expecting to find someone, but the hall was completely empty. The lights flickered above me, casting long, twisting shadows. That's when I remembered Alex's story, the forgotten student. The next few days were a blur, but the strange occurrences continued. The sound of footsteps, a door creaking open in the middle of the night, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. It wasn't long before the whole floor started talking about it. Some students claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a girl in a white gown drifting between rooms. Others swore they'd woken up to find their things moved or out of place. Josh, always skeptical, dismissed it as the overactive imaginations of stressed-out students. But then, one morning, we found something that none of us could explain. When I woke up that morning, my door was wide open. I was certain I had locked it before I went to bed. But what really chilled me was what lay inside. A journal, old and weathered, was on the floor just inside my room. I opened it, and the handwriting inside was messy, frantic. The last entry read, "They've forgotten me. Nobody checks. I'm alone." It was dated just a few months before. Later we learned that room 307 had been abandoned for years. The student who had lived there had vanished without a trace, and no one knew what had happened to her. No police report, no investigation. It was as if she had been erased. That night, I couldn't sleep. The footsteps were louder now, and the whispers almost desperate. The ghost of the forgotten student had finally been heard. I left Dormitory B shortly after that. They say room 307 is still empty, but if you listen carefully, you can hear her, the forgotten student, still pacing the halls, waiting for someone to remember her.